The Alu stalked through ancient Mesopotamian nights as a spirit that attacked sleeping people. This demon from Akkadian and Sumerian myths had the power to send victims into deep sleep-like states or cause loss of mind. People feared the Alu because it struck without warning and left no way to fight back, as it had no mouth or ears to reason with. The spirit took a strange form that looked like a shadow made solid. It moved like a piece of dark cloth floating in wind, with no clear shape but able to wrap around its victims. Though it lacked ears, mouth, and lips, the Alu could sense those who slept and found ways to torment them. The most famous story tells of how the Alu worked with other demons called Utuku to harm humans. These spirits would find someone alone on the open plains at night. The Alu would cover them like a blanket while its demon friends caused sickness and pain. The victim would cry out in their sleep but could not wake up or escape. Families protected themselves from the Alu by hanging special charms above their beds and saying prayers before sleep. Healers worked to wake people who fell into deep sleeps, thinking the Alu had taken hold of their minds. When someone showed signs of being frozen in their sleep, unable to move or speak, people blamed the Alu's nightly attacks. The Banshee haunted Irish family homes as a female spirit who warned of coming death. She announced the passing of family members by wailing a sad song in the dark of night. People both feared and respected her because she gave noble Irish families time to prepare for the loss of their loved ones. She appeared as a woman with long flowing hair that she combed while crying, dressed in gray and green or sometimes all in white. Her eyes glowed red from endless weeping, and though some stories made her tall, most described her as a small figure no taller than 4 feet. The Banshee could take the shape of a young woman who had died young, or an old woman wrapped in burial clothes. Perhaps the most famous tale tells of Lady Fanshaw's meeting with a Banshee. One night in Ireland, Lady Fanshawe woke to see a pale woman with red hair sitting outside her window, crying with a voice so strong it shook the house. At sunrise, they learned their host had died in the night, just as the Banshee had warned. Ancient Irish families listened for the Banshee's cry, knowing it meant someone in their bloodline would soon die. Her wail could break glass with its power, and if many Banshees cried together, it meant someone holy or important had died. Even today, some Irish families claim the Banshee still follows their line, singing her death warning just as she has done for hundreds of years. The Bhoota haunts old buildings and forests across India as a restless spirit caught between life and death. These ghosts can change their shape at will and float slightly above the ground to avoid touching the earth. People fear Bhootas because they possess humans through cursed milk and haunt buildings where they died, yet some communities respect them as protective beings who watch over sacred places. The Bhoota looks human but reveals its true nature through backward-facing feet and the lack of a shadow. It wears pure white clothes and speaks with an odd, nasal voice that sounds wrong to human ears. Though it can turn into any animal, it prefers to appear as either a beautiful woman waiting by the road or as the ghost of someone who died nearby. One common tale warns of a man who offers a ride to a woman in white standing alone at night. As they drive, he notices she floats just above her seat, and her feet point backward. When he realizes she casts no shadow in the moonlight, the man learns too late that he has invited a Bhoota into his car. Indian families protect their homes from Bhootas using iron objects and bowls of water. They burn turmeric to drive away these spirits and never drink milk left in the open at night. When a Bhoota haunts someone, holy men perform special prayers to help the spirit find peace and move on to its next life. The black dog stalked through English towns and dark roads as a massive ghostly hound with glowing eyes. This spirit could sense coming death and warn travelers of danger with its sudden appearance. People both feared and trusted these creatures because some black dogs brought warnings of doom while others protected lonely wanderers from harm. Larger than any living dog, the beast had coal-black fur that seemed to absorb light and eyes that glowed red or yellow in the dark. It made no sound when it walked and left no footprints, yet people heard chains dragging behind it. Some black dogs had huge teeth and frightful howls that echoed through the night. Certainly the most famous tale comes from the churches of Bungay and Blythburgh in 1577, when a black dog known as Black Shuck burst into both buildings during a storm. The beast killed 5 people between the 2 churches and left claw marks in the door that can still be seen today. Lightning struck as the hound ran through the buildings, leaving behind the smell of burning in its wake. Villages across England created ways to guard against the dark hounds. Travelers said prayers before journeys and avoided crossroads at night where the beasts often waited. Yet not everyone feared them. In Somerset, mothers let their children play freely on the hills because they believed the friendly girt dog watched over them and kept them safe. The black-eyed children appeared on American roads and doorsteps as beings that looked like normal kids, except for their completely black eyes. These creatures would ask people for help or try to enter their homes, but seemed to have evil plans. People feared them because the children could not enter homes without permission, yet used clever tricks to make adults want to let them inside. These beings looked like pale children or teenagers wearing plain, outdated clothes. Their most striking feature was their eyes, which were solid black from edge to edge with no white parts showing. They moved in an odd way that made them seem less than human, and their voices sounded too old for their young faces. One notable story tells of reporter Brian Bethel's meeting with two black-eyed children in Texas. The children asked him for a ride to a movie theater, saying they needed to get money to watch a film. When Bethel noticed their pure black eyes, a feeling of deep fear came over him. He drove away quickly as the children grew angry, banging on his car window. Communities shared warnings about these beings across the country. Parents taught their children never to open doors to strangers at night, even other children asking for help. Drivers learned to keep their car doors locked after dark, and people began putting extra locks on their doors after stories spread of the black-eyed children trying to talk their way into homes.
Like this video and subscribe to Maker.
In the homes and farms of Scotland and England, the Brownie worked as a helpful house spirit who came out at night while families slept. This small, magical creature performed countless chores without payment, from cleaning and cooking to helping with farm work. People respected the Brownie because it brought good luck and wealth to any home it chose to live in. The Brownie looked like a small, ugly man with brown skin and hair covering its whole body. Most stories tell of a Brownie wearing nothing but ragged clothes, and some had special features like no nose, just a hole in the middle of its face. It could turn invisible whenever it wanted, and sometimes changed into the shape of animals. A tale tells of two kitchen maids who tried to steal the bowl of milk and bread left out as a gift for their house's Brownie. As they sat down to eat their stolen meal, the invisible Brownie sat between them. Every time one of the maids tried to eat or drink, the Brownie snatched it away. The confused maids began fighting, each blaming the other for stealing, until they heard the Brownie laugh and shout, "Brownie has it all!" The Brownie changed how people lived and worked in important ways. Families had to follow strict rules to keep their Brownie happy. They could never watch it work, try to give it new clothes, or make fun of its efforts. Breaking these rules made the Brownie leave forever, taking its help and the home's good fortune with it. Some stories tell of angry Brownies turning into evil spirits called boggarts if treated badly, causing trouble instead of helping. In ancient Rome, the Camenae were 4 sister goddesses who guarded sacred springs and could see into the future. These powerful beings watched over women giving birth and blessed the waters that flowed from fountains and wells. The Romans both feared and honored them because the Camenae could grant the gift of prophecy to mortals they favored. The Camenae appeared as beautiful young women dressed in flowing white robes, often carrying water jars or cups. They lived near bubbling springs and clear pools, places Romans saw as doorways to divine wisdom. The most sacred spot was a grove with a spring outside Rome's Porta Capena gate, where people came to ask for their help. The most famous story tells of the Camenae named Egeria, who helped Rome's second king, Numa Pompilius. She met him in her sacred grove and taught him the laws and rituals that would make Rome great. Each night she shared divine wisdom with him, helping change Rome from a group of villages into a mighty city with proper laws and customs. The Camenae shaped how Romans lived in many ways. Women in labor prayed to them for safe childbirth. Young girls brought offerings to their fountains hoping for good fortune. Even poets asked these goddesses for inspiration, calling them the Roman Muses. Their sacred springs became places where Romans gathered to worship, seek advice, and honor the goddesses who protected their city's waters. In the Scottish Highlands, the Cat-sìth prowled as a magical creature bigger than any normal cat. This fairy beast could change its shape from cat to witch up to 9 times, and people believed it could steal a person's soul before it reached heaven. The Scots feared and respected the Cat-sìth because it could either bring doom or grant wishes to those brave enough to summon it. The Cat-sìth looked like a huge black cat the size of a large dog, with only one white spot on its chest. When it wanted to frighten people, it would arch its back and make all its fur stand up straight. Some said it was not a true fairy cat at all, but a witch who chose to take the form of this fearsome creature. The most famous story of the Cat-sìth tells of a man who saw 9 black cats, each with a white chest spot, carrying a coffin with a crown on top. One cat told the man to tell Tom Tildrum that Tim Toldrum had died. When the man went home and told this to his own cat named Old Tom, the cat shouted that he was now king of the cats, ran up the chimney, and was never seen again. The Cat-sìth changed how people acted around cats, especially at funerals. Families would keep cats away from rooms where dead bodies lay, fearing the Cat-sìth would steal the soul before it reached heaven. They set up games and riddles to distract any cats that came near. Some brave or foolish people even tried to summon a Cat-sìth named Big Ears by burning cats for 4 days, hoping it would grant their wishes. Within the lands of the Navajo people, the Chindi emerges as a harmful spirit made from all the bad parts of a person at the moment of death. This dark force contains every negative feeling and thought the person ever had, from anger to sadness to fear. People feared the Chindi because even brief contact with it could bring sickness or death. The Chindi has no solid form but moves like poisoned air, invisible yet deadly. It follows the path of the dying person's last breath, carrying with it all their painful memories and bitter thoughts. Most often it stays close to things the dead person once owned or places they lived. One of the most important stories shows why Navajo people never let someone die inside their home. A family once ignored this rule, and their relative died inside their hogan, a traditional Navajo house. The Chindi filled the building with such powerful negative energy that the family had to leave forever, abandoning their home to the dark spirit. The Chindi changed how Navajo people dealt with death in many ways. They moved sick people outdoors when death came near. They burned or buried the dead person's things. They never spoke the names of the dead. These rules kept people safe from the Chindi's harmful touch and helped the living avoid the weight of old sorrows. A giant green dog called the Cat-sìth hunts across lonely moors and rocky hills of Scotland. This fairy hound strikes fear with its 3 ghostly barks, which people can hear from miles away. Anyone who hears all 3 barks may die from pure terror. The Cat-sìth stands as tall as a small cow, with thick dark green fur that blends into the Scottish hills. Its huge paws make no sound when it runs, letting it creep up on its prey without warning. The creature looks like a wolf, but much bigger, with a long, shaggy coat that seems to shimmer in moonlight. One famous story tells of sailors far out at sea who heard the Cat-sìth's first bark echo across the water. They quickly turned their ship toward shore, hearing the second bark grow louder. The men reached land just as the third bark rang out, saving themselves from the fairy hound's deadly power. The Cat-sìth changed how people traveled through the highlands. They avoided walking alone at night and learned to count the beast's barks. If someone heard the first bark, they would run for the nearest house or church. Parents taught their children to listen for the barks and find shelter fast. These legends linked to old Celtic beliefs about fairy creatures that guard the line between our world and the spirit world. The Welsh told similar tales about the Celia and Anwan, ghostly white hounds that served as fairy hunting dogs. Both beasts warned humans to stay away from places where the spirit world came close to our own. The demon cat stalked the dark halls of government buildings in Washington, D.C., appearing as a warning before national tragedies. This black ghost cat grew from the size of a house pet to the size of a tiger when it met human eyes. People working late in places like the Capitol building feared seeing this creature because it meant something bad would soon happen to the country. Its coat was darker than a moonless night, and its eyes glowed like hot coals in a fire pit. When the demon cat walked, it made no sound on the marble floors. Those who saw it said the air turned cold, and the cat's shape seemed to shift and flow like smoke in the wind. The beast could pass through solid walls as if they were made of air. The most famous story of the demon cat came just before President Abraham Lincoln died. A guard saw the cat grow to the size of a giant tiger right in front of him. The guard tried to shoot the beast, but his bullets passed right through it. The next day, Lincoln went to Ford's Theater where he was killed. Workers in the Capitol building changed their habits because of the demon cat. Guards avoided walking alone in certain halls late at night. Some people refused to work after dark. Others left food out, hoping to please the spirit and prevent bad luck. The demon cat became such a strong symbol of coming trouble that even today, people in Washington remember the legend of the growing ghost cat who brought warnings of dark days ahead. The devil bird haunts the thick forests of Sri Lanka, where its awful scream sounds just like a person in terrible pain. This large owl-like creature sends out its bone-chilling cry only before someone nearby is about to die. Villagers who hear the devil bird's call rush to check on their loved ones, knowing that death walks close to their homes that night. The bird stands as tall as a small child, with dark feathers that blend into the night sky. Its round face and huge yellow eyes remind people of a human face frozen in terror. Sharp claws grip tree branches so strongly they leave deep marks in the wood, and its hooked beak could tear through the toughest meat. A story tells of a farmer who laughed at warnings about the devil bird's cry. One night, he heard the scream and ignored it, choosing to stay in his fields. When he returned home, he found his wife had fallen terribly ill. She died before the sun rose the next morning, just as the bird had warned. People in Sri Lankan villages still plan their lives around avoiding the devil bird's attention. They won't walk alone in the forest at night. Families keep their windows closed after dark, even in hot weather. Many people wear special charms to keep the bird away, and some leave small gifts of food at the edge of the forest to please it. The Domovoi lived in the homes of ancient Russian families, hiding in warm places near stoves and in dark corners of cellars. This house spirit held the special power to either help or harm the family it lived with, based on how they treated their home and each other. People both feared and respected the Domovoi because it watched over them while they slept and knew all their household secrets. The Domovoi looked like a tiny old man with a long gray beard and hair that covered most of its body. Its eyes glowed like embers in the dark, and it could change its size from as small as a mouse to as tall as a child. The spirit often wore the same clothes as the master of the house and could copy the voices of family members. One tale tells of a Domovoi that saved a family from fire. The spirit pulled the sleeping mother's hair and pinched the children until they woke up, giving them just enough time to escape their burning house. When the family rebuilt their home, they invited their Domovoi to join them by leaving bread and salt in the corners of their new dwelling. The Domovoi shaped how Russian families lived their daily lives. People swept their floors toward the center of the room to avoid pushing out good luck, and they never whistled indoors because this would make the spirit angry. Families left out small bowls of milk and porridge near the stove to keep their Domovoi happy, believing a well-fed house spirit would protect their home and make their lives better. The Draug haunted the cold waters around Norway, rising from the depths to torment sailors and fishermen. This vengeful spirit of drowned sailors could control storms and winds, using its power to sink ships and drag crews into the sea. People who lived along the coast feared the Draug because its appearance meant certain death for those who saw it. The creature took the form of a bloated corpse with seaweed-wrapped limbs and empty black holes where eyes should be. Its skin glowed with an eerie blue light that lit up the waves around it, and it wore tattered remains of sailing clothes that dripped endlessly with seawater. The Draug often appeared headless, or with its head twisted to face backward. In one chilling tale, a fisherman met a Draug while checking his nets at night. The creature sat in the man's boat, wringing water from its clothes and singing about the storm it would bring. The fisherman rowed to shore as fast as he could, but the Draug's storm followed him. Just as the waves nearly swallowed his boat, the man reached land and survived, becoming one of the few people to escape a Draug's deadly prediction. The Draug changed how coastal communities lived their lives. Sailors refused to whistle on their ships because they believed this would call the Draug from the depths. Fishermen always left one fish from their catch in the sea as an offering, hoping this would keep the creature away. People built their homes facing away from the ocean to avoid seeing the Draug's ghostly light through their windows at night. The Duende lived in the homes and forests of Spain and Latin America, moving between the human world and the spirit world as it wished. This small magical being could enter dreams and cause both good luck and chaos, depending on its mood. People both feared and sought out the Duende because it could grant wishes, but it often twisted these wishes in clever and sometimes cruel ways. Looking like a child-sized person with backward-facing feet and a red cap, the Duende had dark green or brown skin that helped it hide in shadows. Its eyes glowed yellow in the dark, and it had long fingers perfect for picking locks and stealing small objects. The Duende could make itself so small it could slip through keyholes or grow tall enough to reach high shelves. The most famous story tells of a Duende that helped a poor shoemaker. The spirit fixed broken shoes each night while the shoemaker slept, but it also played tricks on the man's rich customers by making their new shoes too tight or too loose. When the shoemaker left out a gift of honey and bread to thank the spirit, the Duende stopped its tricks and helped his business grow. The Duende shaped daily life in many ways. Parents warned children to clean their rooms, or the Duende would make their toys disappear. People hung bells near windows and doors because the spirit hated loud noises. Families left out small gifts of food and shiny objects to keep the Duende happy, hoping it would bring good luck instead of mischief to their homes. The Dvorovoi guarded farmyards and barns in ancient Russia, watching over livestock and protecting animals from harm. This farm spirit could speak with animals and control their health, blessing them with good births or cursing them with sickness. Farmers both feared and honored the Dvorovoi because it decided if their animals would live or die. Like its cousin the Domovoi, the Dvorovoi looked like a small man with thick fur covering its body, but its fur matched the color of the favorite animal in its barn. It had bright green eyes that shone in the dark, and long fingers ended in sharp claws for climbing. The spirit could change its shape to match any farm animal under its care. One well-known story tells of a Dvorovoi that saved a poor farmer's last cow. During a harsh winter, the spirit gathered warm hay for the cow and led mice to drop bits of grain near its mouth. When spring came, the cow gave birth to twin calves, and the farmer's luck changed. The farmer had left out fresh milk each night, earning the spirit's help. The Dvorovoi shaped how farmers cared for their animals. They never brought new animals to the farm on cloudy days because the spirit disliked bad weather. Farmers brushed their horses from head to tail, never backward, to please the Dvorovoi's sense of order. They kept their barns clean and warm, knowing the spirit would reward good care with healthy animals and rich milk. The Dybbuk haunted Jewish communities across Eastern Europe, slipping into the bodies of troubled people and speaking through their mouths. This restless spirit could enter anyone who showed weakness through sadness or fear. People dreaded the Dybbuk because it took control of its host completely, using their body while the person remained trapped inside, aware of everything happening but helpless to stop it. The Dybbuk looked like smoke or clear water when it moved between bodies, but once inside a person, it showed itself through their changed face and voice. The host's eyes turned glassy and distant, their skin became pale as paper, and they spoke in the Dybbuk's true voice, often deep and rough, unlike their normal way of talking. Sometimes the host's body bent and twisted in ways that showed something else lived inside them. The most famous Dybbuk story tells of a young bride named Leah who became host to the spirit of her dead love, Shonan. During Leah's wedding to another man, Shonan's Dybbuk entered her body and spoke through her, stopping the wedding. The spirit refused to leave until a group of rabbis, men who study holy books, worked together to force it out through prayer and ancient wisdom. The fear of Dybbuks changed how people lived, making them careful about showing strong feelings or walking alone at night. Families watched their grieving relatives closely, knowing sadness could open the door to a Dybbuk. When someone acted strangely, people first wondered if a Dybbuk had found them. Holy men made good money selling charms and prayers they claimed would keep the spirits away. People believed Dybbuks were the souls of those who died with deep regret or anger, trying to finish something left undone in life. This made many Jews think twice about their actions while alive, not wanting their souls to become lost spirits after death. Communities built special rooms in their places of worship where rabbis could safely remove Dybbuks from their hosts without putting others at risk. Faceless spirits drifted through the forests of Japan, wearing pure white robes that seemed to float on the evening breeze. These lost souls could steal faces from anyone who looked directly at them, leaving their victims blank and smooth like eggs. People feared these spirits most during festival times, when the streets filled with crowds and a faceless one could easily blend in while hunting. The spirits stood as tall as grown men, but moved like smoke on the wind, their white robes never touching the ground. Where a face should be, they showed only smooth, pale skin stretched tight over bone. Their hands reached out like white spider legs, long and thin with too many joints, and they gave off a faint glow that looked like moonlight. A memorable story tells of a young girl named Akane who met a faceless spirit at a summer festival. When the spirit reached for her face, Akane held up her paper festival mask as a trick. The spirit took the mask instead of her real face, trapping itself in the paper form. The mask burned to ash in the morning sun, taking the spirit with it. Villages changed their festival customs because of these spirits. People wore paper masks not just for fun, but for safety. Parents taught children to walk backwards through crowds so nothing could sneak up and steal their faces. Market sellers hung mirrors everywhere, believing faceless ones would catch their own empty reflection and run away in shame. The spirits grew stronger each time they took a face, adding it to their collection like a painter adds colors to a picture. Anyone who lost their face to these spirits had to find and destroy the spirit within 7 days, or their face would stay part of its collection forever. Holy men made good money selling special red paper masks that they promised would protect people during festival season. Among the green hills and misty forests of Ireland, fairies built their homes in secret places between our world and theirs. These tiny beings held great magic that could either help or harm humans, changing their luck or stealing their children. People both feared and tried to please the fairies, leaving them gifts of milk and bread to stay in their good graces. Fairies stood no taller than a human hand, with bodies that glowed like starlight and wings like those of dragonflies. Their clothes came from flower petals and spider silk, shining with all the colors of a rainbow. Some looked beautiful, with perfect tiny faces, while others had crooked noses and sharp teeth that showed their wilder nature. The most famous fairy tale tells of a shoemaker who woke one morning to find his work finished by fairy helpers. Each night, the fairies made shoes more fine than any human could craft, bringing the shoemaker good fortune and wealth. But when he and his wife tried to catch sight of the fairies at work, the magical beings never returned, unhappy that humans had tried to spy on their secret work. People changed many parts of their daily lives to please the fairies. They would not build houses where fairy paths ran, leaving empty spaces in their towns and fields. Mothers pinned iron needles to baby clothes to keep the fairies from stealing their children and leaving changelings, fairy babies, in their place. Farmers left corners of their fields unharvested as fairy shares. The power of fairies grew stronger as night fell, reaching its peak when the moon was full. During these times, people heard fairy music coming from under hills and saw rings of mushrooms where they had danced. Anyone who stepped into a fairy ring or ate fairy food would be trapped in the fairy world forever, living in endless parties but losing all sense of human time. The Feldgeister lived in the fields and farms of Germany, watching over crops and farm animals. These nature spirits held power over the growth of wheat, corn, and other grains that kept farming families alive. People both feared and respected the Feldgeister because these spirits could either bless their fields with rich harvests or curse them with crop failure. These spirits looked different to each person who saw them. Some farmers reported seeing them as tiny men with grass-green clothing and straw hats. Others described them as beautiful women wearing dresses made of wheat stalks and crowns of cornflowers. Many claimed the Feldgeister could change their size, growing as tall as the grain itself or shrinking smaller than a mouse. The most famous story of the Feldgeister tells of a farmer who forgot to leave the last sheaf of wheat standing in his field, which was the spirit's rightful home. The angry Feldgeister followed him home and made mischief all winter, spoiling his stored grain and tangling his sheep's wool. Only when spring came and the farmer planted new crops, leaving a corner of the field just for the spirits, did the trouble stop. The Feldgeister shaped how German farmers worked their land for hundreds of years. Families left offerings of milk and bread for the spirits during planting and harvest times. Many farmers would not cut down the last bunch of grain in their fields, tying it into a special shape as a house for the Feldgeister instead. These customs helped people feel they had some control over their uncertain lives as farmers. The Gaki haunt the dark corners of Japan as cursed spirits of the hungry dead. These beings suffer endless hunger and thirst as punishment for greed or bad actions in their past lives. People feared Gaki because they could spread sickness and bad luck, but they also felt pity for these suffering spirits. A Gaki looks like a human who has starved for years, with pale gray skin stretched tight over bones and a stomach swollen from hunger. Their mouths are no bigger than the eye of a needle, making it impossible to eat or drink enough to ease their pain. Some Gaki grow to be as tall as trees, while others shrink down smaller than children, but all of them move with jerky, desperate movements as they search for food. The most famous story tells of a Gaki who haunted a village temple, drinking the oil from the sacred lamps each night. The clever head monk filled the lamps with holy water instead of oil. When the Gaki drank the blessed water, it washed away its sins and freed the spirit from its cursed form, allowing it to move on to a peaceful rest. The belief in Gaki changed how Japanese people thought about greed and waste. Families would leave small offerings of food and water outside their homes, hoping to ease the spirit's suffering and keep them from causing trouble. Many people used stories of the Gaki to teach their children about sharing and warn them against being selfish. The Gashadokuro stalks the dark roads and empty fields of Japan as a giant made of human bones. This spirit towers 15 times taller than a normal person and can turn invisible at will. People feared these monsters because they would grab lone travelers at night and bite off their heads, drinking the blood that sprayed up from their victims' necks. The monster looks like a huge skeleton with glowing red eyes and a jaw that can open wide enough to swallow a horse. Its bones come from people who died from hunger during wars and famines, their angry spirits joining together to form one giant skeleton. The Gashadokuro's bones make a terrible rattling sound as it walks, like hundreds of wooden sticks being shaken together. The most famous story tells of a samurai who heard the sound of rattling bones while riding home one night. The clever warrior remembered that temple bells could drive away evil spirits. He raced to the nearest temple and rang its giant bell, making the Gashadokuro shrink away and fall apart into piles of normal bones. Japanese people changed their habits because of the Gashadokuro. Travelers would carry small bells with them on night journeys and ring them often to stay safe. Villages made sure to give proper burials to everyone who died, even strangers, hoping to prevent angry spirits from joining together into these bone giants. The fear of Gashadokuro also led people to help others in need. Families shared food during hard times and took care of their neighbors, believing that letting people die from hunger would create more of these monsters. Many villages kept records of those who died without proper burials, so priests could say prayers for their spirits. The Isle of Man, a small island between England and Ireland, became home to one of the strangest beings in folklore during the 1930s. Jeff, who called himself a talking mongoose, claimed he could speak several languages and spy on the island's people. The Irving family, who lived in a remote farmhouse, said this clever creature brought them news from miles away and knew secrets no animal should know. His appearance mixed familiar animals in an odd way that made people unsure what he truly was. Witnesses described him as smaller than a house cat, with yellow fur like a mongoose but a bushy tail like a squirrel. The Irvings said he had small hands that could hold things, a high-pitched voice that sounded almost human, and bright eyes that glowed in the dark. The most famous story about Jeff began when he first spoke to the Irving family through their walls. He started by copying their words, then began telling jokes and singing songs. Soon he was bringing them gossip from around the island, claiming he could run faster than any car and slip through the smallest holes to learn people's secrets. The mystery of Jeff changed how many islanders lived their daily lives. Some feared leaving their homes alone, worried the creature might be watching them. Others made the long journey to the Irving farm, hoping to hear Jeff speak, though he often refused to show himself to visitors. The local newspaper wrote about him so often that people far beyond the Isle of Man became curious about the talking mongoose. The story grew so big that experts from London came to study Jeff, trying to prove if he was real or fake. While they found small footprints and heard strange voices, no one ever caught or photographed the creature clearly. Even today, people still debate whether Jeff was a clever trick, a real animal, or something else that no one could explain. The mountains of Lebanon hold stories of the Ghaddar, a deadly shapeshifter that hunts lonely travelers at night. This being can change from human to beast in moments, using its powers to trick people who walk alone. Villagers feared the Ghaddar because it could look like someone they knew, even copying their voice and movements perfectly. In its true form, the Ghaddar looks like a mix between a large wolf and a human. It walks on two legs like a person, but has thick fur covering its body, sharp claws instead of fingers, and yellow eyes that glow in the dark. The creature stands as tall as a doorway and has teeth longer than a human finger. One famous story tells of a young man who met a friend on the road late at night. They walked together until the friend asked to stop and rest in the shadows. As they sat down, the young man noticed his friend's shadow on the rocks looked like a monster. He ran away just as the Ghaddar showed its true form and tried to grab him with its claws. The fear of the Ghaddar changed how people lived in Lebanese villages. No one traveled alone after sunset, and parents warned children to stay close to home at night. People learned to look for signs that someone might be a Ghaddar in disguise, like staying away from bright lights or speaking in an odd way. Houses in mountain villages kept special metal charms above their doors to keep the Ghaddar away. Travelers carried small bags of salt, which stories said would make the creature show its real shape if thrown at it. These old habits became part of daily life, and some people still follow them today. Along dark roads and in empty houses across every land, ghosts make their homes between our world and whatever lies beyond. These spirits of the dead can pass through walls, become invisible, or take forms that mirror how they looked in life. People both fear and respect ghosts because they remind us that death is not always the end of a story. A ghost might look like a pale copy of its former self, see-through like fog or thin glass. Some appear as spots of light that float in the air, while others look solid until they vanish into nothing. Many ghosts wear the clothes they died in, though these outfits often seem old or torn. The most famous ghost story comes from a small town where a young woman in a white dress appears on the side of a road late at night. She asks drivers for a ride home, but when they reach the address she gives, she disappears from the car. When the drivers check the house, they learn a girl matching her description died in an accident many years ago. Ghost stories changed how people build and arrange their homes even today. Many avoid putting mirrors across from beds because ghosts might use them as doors. Some leave out food or drink for spirits of family members who have died. In Japan, people count their guests in photographs carefully, worried that an extra face might show a ghost has joined their group. These beings connect the world of the living to the world of the dead, carrying messages or warnings across this line. Some return because they have unfinished business, while others stay to watch over people they love. Ghost stories teach us that the bonds between people can be stronger than death itself. The Ghoul prowled ancient graveyards in the lands between Egypt and Iraq. This hungry spirit could change its shape to trick people into walking alone at night. People across the Middle East feared ghouls because these beings ate human flesh and lived in places of death, waiting to catch anyone who wandered too close to their hunting grounds. A ghoul looked like a mix between a human and a wild dog, with sharp claws and glowing eyes that shined yellow in the dark. It could make itself appear as a normal person, but its feet always stayed backwards, pointing behind instead of ahead. The ghoul's skin was rough and gray like old leather, and it gave off a smell like spoiled meat. The most famous tale of the ghoul tells of a merchant who met a crying woman beside a graveyard at night. The woman asked him to help find her lost child, but when the merchant followed her between the graves, she changed into her true form. The merchant ran away and found shelter in a nearby shrine, staying there until sunrise forced the ghoul to hide. The fear of ghouls changed how people lived their daily lives. No one walked near graveyards after dark, and travelers always went in groups with torches and weapons. Parents used stories of ghouls to teach children to stay close to home at night and to be careful of strangers who asked for help in dark places. The Grim Reaper walks through both the world of the living and the dead, marking the end of life for all beings. This dark figure carries a long, curved blade called a scythe, which it uses to cut the ties between body and soul. People across Europe feared seeing the Reaper because its presence meant death would soon follow. Dressed in a black robe that flows like smoke, the Reaper stands taller than any human. Its face stays hidden in the shadows of a deep hood, with only gleaming eyes visible in the darkness. Pale, bony hands grip its farming tool turned deadly weapon, and wherever it walks, the air grows cold. The most famous story tells of a wealthy merchant who tried to cheat death. When the Reaper came for him, the merchant offered all his gold for more time. The Reaper stayed silent and reached out its hand. The merchant ran from town to town, but each night those gleaming eyes watched from the shadows until finally his time ran out. The Reaper shaped how people thought about death and dying. Some saw it as cruel and tried to fight against their fate, while others viewed it as a friend who guided souls to their final rest. In times of great sickness or war, people claimed to see the Reaper walking through towns, choosing who would live and who would die. Among the shadows of Korean homes and villages, the Gwisin haunts the living with a burning need for revenge. This angry spirit returns from death when someone dies with strong feelings of hate or sadness. People feared Gwisin because these ghosts would follow their targets day and night, causing bad luck and illness until they got what they wanted. The Gwisin looks like a woman in a white dress, the kind used to bury the dead in Korea. Her black hair hangs loose and messy over her face, hiding dark, empty eyes. The ghost floats above the ground, her feet never touching the earth, and her hands reach out with long, bony fingers toward her victims. A famous story tells of a young woman who died on her wedding day. She came back as a Gwisin and haunted her groom, who had secretly loved another. Each night she appeared in his room, crying tears of blood, until the guilt made him confess his lies to her family. Only then did her spirit find peace and leave this world. The fear of Gwisin changed how people treated others in life and death. Families worked hard to solve any fights before someone died, hoping to prevent their return as an angry ghost. When someone passed away with unfinished business, people would hold special ceremonies to calm the spirit and help it move on. The Hannya stalked the gardens and forests of Japan, burning with jealousy and hate. This demon began her life as a human woman whose love turned to dark magic and rage. People feared the Hannya because she could read minds and knew their deepest secrets, using this knowledge to destroy families and relationships. Her face shows the pain of her change from woman to demon. 2 sharp horns grow from her forehead, and her mouth stretches wide with long fangs like a snake. Her eyes glow red with anger, and her skin shines like metal in moonlight. She wears the torn remains of fine silk robes, showing her past life as a noble lady. One tale speaks of a court lady who loved a prince who married another. Her sadness turned to hate, and she studied dark magic until she became a Hannya. She haunted the prince's dreams and poisoned his thoughts against his wife. When the prince went mad and his family fell to ruin, the Hannya laughed, but her tears fell like blood on the ground. Villages set up special shrines to keep Hannya away from their homes. Women in love gave gifts to these shrines, hoping to protect their hearts from turning dark. Mothers taught their daughters to guard against jealousy, warning that even the smallest seed of hate could grow into a demon. Priests made special masks showing the Hannya's face, which they used in plays and ceremonies. These masks changed how they looked based on how you held them. Tilted up, they showed rage. Tilted down, they showed sadness. People said this showed how close love and hate lived in the human heart. The Hat Man moves through shadows and appears in bedrooms across the world. This tall, dark figure watches people while they sleep or rest, standing still in corners or doorways. People fear the Hat Man because he brings feelings of dread and helplessness, making them unable to move or cry out while he stands in their room. Like a shadow given life, the Hat Man stands over 7 feet tall and wears an old-style wide-brimmed hat and long coat. His body seems made of deep darkness, darker than the night around him. No one has ever seen his face clearly, but some say they see red eyes glowing under his hat. A famous report tells of a young boy who woke to find the Hat Man in his room night after night. The figure never spoke or moved toward him, just watched from the corner. When the boy's family moved to a new home hundreds of miles away, the Hat Man followed, appearing in his new bedroom on the first night. The Hat Man changed how many people view their own homes and bedrooms. Some leave lights on all night or put mirrors facing their beds to watch for him. Others who see him feel marked or chosen, carrying a fear that he might return each time they close their eyes to sleep. Unlike most shadow people who pass quickly, the Hat Man returns to the same people many times. Those who see him often meet others who have seen him too, sharing similar details about his look and the fear he brings, even though they live in different parts of the world. The Headless Corpse stalked the misty roads and dark alleys of medieval England. This walking dead thing searched endless for its missing head, grabbing any person who came too close. People feared these spirits because they would try to steal a living person's head to replace their own. The spirit wore the rotting clothes it died in, with torn and dirty fabric hanging from its body. Where its head should be, only a ragged stump of neck remained, sometimes dripping ghostly blood that vanished before touching the ground. Its hands reached out with long, grasping fingers as it stumbled forward. One tale tells of a merchant who rode his horse down a foggy road at night. A headless figure stepped out of the mist and grabbed his leg, trying to pull him from his horse. The merchant kicked free and rode hard, but the corpse followed, running as fast as the horse until they passed a church. The holy ground forced the spirit to stop. People changed their daily habits to avoid meeting these spirits. They refused to travel alone after dark and carried protective charms blessed by priests. Towns built shrines at spots where headless corpses appeared, hoping to give the restless dead peace and protect travelers who passed by. When bodies were found without heads from accidents or murder, towns performed special burial rites. They placed heavy stones on the grave and said prayers to keep the dead from rising to search for their missing parts. Some graves still show these stones today, marking the resting places of the headless dead. The Hellhound prowled the crossroads and graveyards of northern Europe, guarding the border between the world of the living and the dead. These giant black dogs stood as tall as a horse, with eyes that glowed like balls of fire in the night. People both feared and respected hellhounds, believing they could smell death on those marked for the afterlife. The beast's appearance struck terror into all who saw it. Its fur was blacker than the darkest night, and smoke curled from its sharp teeth and massive jaws. Like shadows come to life, hellhounds could melt into darkness at will. Their howls echoed for miles, a sound that made blood run cold and hearts stop beating. The most famous tale tells of a hellhound that haunted Black Shuck's Lane in England. One stormy night, it burst through the doors of a church, killing 2 people with a single glance from its blazing eyes. The church steeple fell that same night, as if struck down by the creature's power. Claw marks can still be seen on the church door today. People changed their habits to avoid meeting these creatures. They stayed away from graveyards at night and refused to walk alone on dark roads. If someone reported seeing a hellhound, folks would gather in groups for safety, knowing that the sight of one often meant death would visit their village soon. Some left offerings of food at crossroads, hoping to keep the beasts away from their homes and families. The Hinn prowled the hot deserts of ancient Arabia, shifting between the forms of a black dog, a fierce wolf, and a horrid demon. This shape-changing spirit held the power to enter a traveler's dreams and lead them deep into deadly sandstorms. People feared the Hinn most during the darkest nights of winter, when its haunting howls echoed across the dunes and warned of coming storms. At first glance, travelers might mistake the Hinn for a normal desert dog with thick black fur and glowing yellow eyes. Yet this creature stood as tall as a camel when it wished, with claws sharp as daggers and teeth that shimmered like pearls in the moonlight. In its demon form, the Hinn's skin turned gray as ash, while great wings of shadow spread from its shoulders, and its eyes burned red as hot coals. The most famous tale of the Hinn tells of a rich merchant who mocked the creature's power. One cold night, the Hinn visited the merchant's dreams and led his caravan into the heart of a great sandstorm. When morning came, travelers found the merchant's camels wandering the dunes alone, their master lost forever to the desert winds. Desert tribes learned to watch for signs of the Hinn before starting any journey. They kept special amulets of blue stone to ward off its dream magic, and never camped near places where wild dogs gathered. Travelers shared warnings about the Hinn's hunting grounds and made offerings of meat at crossroads to keep the spirit peaceful. The Huodou lived in the mountains of ancient China, bringing both fire and wisdom to those who lived nearby. This mighty dragon-like beast carried a special fire in its belly that could burn hot enough to melt stone. Unlike other dragons that people feared, the Huodou earned respect from villagers because it used its flames to help rather than harm. The Huodou stood as tall as 3 houses stacked on top of each other, with scales that shone like copper in the sun. Its neck stretched long and graceful like a swan's, but thick muscles rippled beneath its skin. When it opened its mouth, people saw teeth sharp as swords and a tongue that glowed like hot coals. One famous tale suggests a time when endless winter gripped the land, and people could not cook their food or stay warm. The Huodou heard their cries and flew down from its mountain home. It breathed its magical fire into special stones, teaching people how to keep the flames burning forever. These stones became the first hearths in Chinese homes. The Huodou changed how people lived by giving them the gift of lasting fire. Families began to gather around hearths to cook, tell stories, and stay warm together. Villages grew larger because people could now live comfortably in cold places, and they always left small gifts of food near their hearths to thank the Huodou for its help. The caring nature of the Huodou made it different from other fire creatures in stories. While most fire-breathing beasts destroyed things, the Huodou built communities by sharing its gift. Parents told their children to be like the Huodou, to use their talents to help others rather than cause harm. The Inipi, a sacred spirit guide of the Lakota people, dwelled in the steam of special dome-shaped lodges across the Great Plains of North America. This powerful being could cleanse both body and soul through the sacred ceremony of the sweat lodge, where it turned ordinary steam into healing medicine. The Lakota people deeply respected the Inipi for its ability to bring clarity of mind and heal sickness through the steam that filled these special places. The Inipi took shape in thick clouds of steam that rose from heated stones, forming shapes that medicine people could read like sacred messages. Inside the dark lodge, it moved like dancing fog, touching each person with warm fingers of mist that seemed to know exactly where healing was needed. The steam could grow as tall as a standing person or spread low across the ground like a blanket of clouds. The most famous story of the Inipi tells of a time when sickness spread through a Lakota camp during a harsh winter. As people grew weak and hope faded, a medicine man built a sweat lodge and called upon the Inipi. The spirit came in a great cloud of steam, and over 4 days and nights, it worked through the medicine man to heal the entire camp, leaving no one untouched by its healing power. The Inipi shaped how the Lakota people cared for their health and spirit. Families would visit the sweat lodge to ask the Inipi for help before making big choices, healing the sick, or preparing for sacred ceremonies. The steam spirit taught people that healing comes through cleansing both the body and mind together, not just treating the outer signs of sickness. The Jiangshi haunted villages across ancient China, hopping through dark streets at night in search of living victims. This undead creature drained life force from people by touching them, leaving behind cold, pale bodies. Both common people and rulers feared these monsters because they could turn their victims into more Jiangshi, spreading like a deadly disease through towns. The Jiangshi looked like a stiff corpse wearing old government clothes from long ago, with its arms stretched out in front. Its skin turned green or black after death, and long fingernails grew like claws from its hands. A yellow paper with magic words stuck to its forehead kept it from becoming fully awake and even more dangerous. The most famous story tells of a Jiangshi that woke up in a temple when its paper fell off during a storm. The hopping corpse chased the temple keeper through the halls until sunrise. The keeper survived by holding his breath when the Jiangshi came near, since these creatures found their prey by listening for breathing. This tale taught people an important way to hide from the monsters. People changed their daily lives to stay safe from Jiangshi. They came home before dark and put rice or coins outside their doors because the creatures had to stop and count each grain or piece. Families hung mirrors on their front gates since Jiangshi feared their own reflection. These habits became part of Chinese culture, and parents still warn children not to stay out late by telling Jiangshi stories. In old Japan, the Jikininki haunted graveyards and places where people died. These hungry ghosts could smell death from many miles away and rushed to eat the bodies of the dead. People feared these spirits not just for their awful eating habits, but because anyone who lived a selfish life could become one after death. The Jikininki looked like rotting corpses dressed in old burial clothes. Their skin hung loose on their bones, and their eyes glowed red in the dark. They had long, sharp claws for digging up graves, and teeth like knives for tearing flesh. Though they could walk through walls and become invisible, they could not hide their terrible smell of decay. The most famous story tells of a Buddhist priest who met a Jikininki living alone in an abandoned temple. The ghost served the priest dinner and gave him a place to sleep. That night, the priest woke to see the Jikininki in its true form, eating a corpse from the village. Instead of running away, the priest prayed for the spirit. His prayers helped free the ghost from its curse. These creatures taught people about the price of greed and selfishness. Families made sure to honor their dead with proper burials and ceremonies to prevent their loved ones from becoming Jikininki. The stories warned people to live good lives and help others, or risk becoming hungry ghosts themselves. Buddhist priests often told these tales to teach people about kindness and the results of bad actions. The Killakee Cat haunts the dark halls of Killakee House in Ireland's Dublin Mountains. This ghostly black cat grows to the size of a large dog and appears only at night. Local people both fear and respect this spirit because it guards ancient secrets of the house and shows itself to warn of coming danger. The cat looks like any normal black house cat at first, but it can change its size at will. Its eyes shine bright green in the darkness, and its fur seems to absorb all light around it. When it walks, it makes no sound, and it can pass through solid walls as if they were made of air. One cold winter night in the 1800s, the lady of Killakee House saw the giant cat in her bedroom. Instead of running away, she watched as it grew larger and pointed with its paw toward the window. When she looked outside, she saw flames in the stable. Thanks to the cat's warning, she saved all her horses before the fire could harm them. The Killakee Cat changed how people saw the old house. Families who lived there began to welcome its presence, seeing it as a guardian rather than a threat. Even today, visitors to Killakee House hope to catch a glimpse of the mysterious cat, and many leave small gifts of milk or fish near the spots where it often appears. The kobold prowled through German mines and homes, bringing either good fortune or terrible luck to those it met. This small spirit could turn invisible at will and possessed great skill in metalwork, especially with silver and gold. Miners and craftspeople left small gifts of food and wine to earn the kobold's favor, fearing its power to either help their work flourish or cause endless misfortune. The creature stood no taller than a young child, with bright red hair and wrinkled, leathery skin that glowed softly in the dark. Its eyes shimmered like polished copper coins, and its clever fingers moved quickly as it worked. The kobold often wore simple clothes like miners and craftsmen, though its garments never showed signs of wear or dirt. One famous tale tells of a kobold named Hinselman who lived in Huodou Castle. The spirit protected the noble family living there, warning them of coming dangers and helping their servants with heavy tasks. But when guests mocked his small size or forgot to leave him gifts, Hinselman played tricks on them, hiding their belongings, tangling their hair while they slept, and making strange noises in the night. German families changed their daily habits to please these household spirits. They kept their homes clean and orderly, never went to bed with dirty dishes in the sink, and always saved a small portion of their meals as offerings. Miners carved special niches into tunnel walls where they left candles and bread for their kobold helpers, believing this would lead them to rich veins of ore and protect them from cave-ins. The cuckood lived in the thick forests of eastern Australia, where it moved silently through the trees at night. This giant creature could make itself invisible at will, which helped it hunt and watch over its home. Aboriginal peoples both feared and respected the cuckood because it protected good people who cared for the land, but punished those who harmed the forest. The beings looked like a mix between a giant owl and a tree kangaroo, with soft gray fur and huge golden eyes that glowed in the dark. It stood as tall as 3 men when on its back legs, with long arms that ended in curved claws sharp as stone knives. Its head could turn all the way around like an owl's, and its feet were so soft it could walk without making a sound. The most famous story of the cuckood tells of how it saved a lost child who had wandered into the forest at night. The creature made itself visible to the scared young boy and led him safely home through the darkness. Along the way, it scared away dangerous animals and helped the child find fresh water and sweet berries to eat. People who lived near the forest changed their ways because of the cuckood. They taught their children to walk softly and respect the trees, plants, and animals. Hunters would leave small gifts of food for the creature and ask its blessing before taking what they needed from the forest. Parents told their children that the cuckood watched over them, keeping them safe as long as they cared for the land. Lampetia lived on a bright island in the warm seas near Greece. She and her sister watched over their father's special cattle, which glowed with the light of the sun. As one of the daughters of the sun god Helios, she had the power to sense when anyone came near the sacred animals she protected. Her beauty matched the golden glow of daylight, with hair that shone like morning rays and eyes that sparkled like stars. She wore flowing white robes that caught the wind as she walked among the cattle each day. Like her father, she stood much taller than normal humans, and her voice rang out like bells across the waters. The most famous story of Lampetia tells how she caught the hungry crew of Odysseus killing her father's cattle. When the sailors tried to take the animals for food, she flew straight to her father and told him what happened. Helios became so angry that he asked Zeus to punish the men who had eaten his sacred cows. The story of Lampetia taught sailors and travelers to respect holy places and animals that belonged to the gods. People would leave small gifts at shrines near the coast to ask for her protection during sea journeys. Farmers also prayed to her to watch over their own cattle and keep them safe from thieves. Lemures haunted the streets and houses of ancient Rome during special festivals for the dead. These angry spirits caused trouble for the living, appearing at night to frighten people and bring bad luck to homes. Romans feared these ghosts because they belonged to people who died far from home or never got a proper burial. The Romans pictured lemures as see-through shadows that could walk through walls. They looked like thin, gray figures with hollow eyes and long, grabbing fingers. Some stories said they wore dark cloaks that floated in the air, making them look like pieces of night that had come alive. Every May, Roman families tried to chase these spirits away during the Lemuria festival. The head of each house walked barefoot at midnight, spitting black beans behind him and telling the lemures to leave. He banged bronze pots and asked 9 times for the angry ghost to go away, never looking back as he did this. The fear of lemures changed how Romans lived and built their homes. They put special charms near windows and doors to keep the spirits out. Families were careful to give all their dead relatives proper funerals, hoping they would not come back as lemures. They also kept their houses clean and peaceful, believing this would help keep angry ghosts away. The Light Elves lived in a bright world called Alfheim, high above the realm of humans in Norse mythology. These magical beings glowed with their own inner light, which they used to help plants grow and heal sick creatures. People looked up to Light Elves as wise teachers who shared knowledge about nature's secrets and the changing seasons. Their beauty set them apart from all other beings in the 9 worlds. Light Elves stood as tall as humans, but moved with the grace of flowing water. Their skin shimmered like moonlight on snow, and their hair caught the sun like threads of gold. Their eyes held all the colors of the sunrise, and they wore clothes woven from starlight. A famous story explains how a light elf named Freyr fell in love with a giant's daughter named Gerd. Freyr gave up his magical sword and sent his trusted friend to win Gerd's heart. The friend crossed dangerous lands and faced fierce guards to deliver Freyr's message. After 9 days, Gerd agreed to meet Freyr in a peaceful grove. Light elves shaped how Norse people viewed beauty and goodness. Farmers prayed to them for healthy crops and gentle weather. Healers asked for their help with difficult illnesses. Parents told their children that being kind and honest would make them as lovely as the Light Elves, teaching good values through these stories. The little people lived in the green hills and forests of Ireland, keeping themselves hidden from human eyes. These tiny magical beings, known as leprechauns and fairies, held great power over luck and fortune. Irish people both feared and respected them, knowing the little people could either help or harm those who crossed their paths. Their size ranged from as small as a child's finger to no taller than a 3-year-old child. Most little people dressed in green or brown clothes that matched the leaves in trees where they lived. They often had pointed ears, bright eyes that sparkled with mischief, and quick, nimble movements that let them vanish in the blink of an eye. The most famous story tells of a man who caught a leprechaun and forced him to reveal where he had hidden his gold. The leprechaun pointed to a field of flowers and said his treasure lay under a specific plant. The man tied a red ribbon to mark the spot, but when he returned with a shovel, he found the leprechaun had tied red ribbons to every flower in the field. Irish families left small gifts of milk and bread outside their doors to keep the little people happy. Farmers would not build on certain hills, believing they belonged to the fairies. Parents taught their children to be polite when speaking about the little people, who might be listening from nearby shadows or trees. The belief in little people shaped how the Irish built their homes and roads, often creating paths that curved around fairy rings, circles of mushrooms thought to mark magical ground. These tiny beings taught people to respect nature and remember that the smallest creatures could hold the greatest power. The Merry Lwyd roamed the winter streets of Welsh villages, bringing both fear and fun during the darkest days of the year. This horse spirit, made from a real horse skull mounted on a pole and draped in white sheets, visited homes during the 12 days of Christmas. People respected the Merry Lwyd for its power to bring good luck to those who welcomed it and bad fortune to those who turned it away. The spirit looked like a ghost horse walking on two legs, carried by a person hidden under flowing white cloth that reached the ground. Glass beads or bottles served as its eyes, giving them an eerie glow in the lantern light. The jaw of the skull could snap open and shut with the pull of a string, making the Merry Lwyd seem alive as it moved through the streets. The Merry Lwyd and its group of singers would stop at each house and begin a battle of songs and rhymes with the people inside. The homeowners had to match the Merry Lwyd's clever words with their own verses, trying to outdo each other in a friendly contest. If the Merry Lwyd won, the family had to let the group inside for food and drinks. People believed the Merry Lwyd brought the old year to an end and welcomed in the new one with its visits. Families prepared special treats and drinks for the spirit, hoping it would bless their homes with good luck for the coming year. Children both feared and loved the sight of the Merry Lwyd, running to peek through windows when they heard its songs coming down the street. The Mavka haunted the deep forests of Ukraine, appearing as a beautiful young woman who lured travelers away from their paths. This forest spirit possessed the power to control plants and animals, making every branch and leaf bend to her will. People both feared and respected the Mavka because she protected the forest, but showed no mercy to those who harmed its creatures or trees. She looked like a lovely maiden with long, flowing hair decorated with flowers and leaves, wearing clothes made of moonlight that seemed to float in the air. The Mavka's most striking feature was her lack of a shadow and no reflection in water or mirrors. From behind, people could see straight through her back, revealing her hollow form like an empty tree trunk. One famous instance tells of a young woodcutter who fell in love with a Mavka's beauty and sweet singing. She led him deeper into the woods each night, teaching him the secrets of forest plants and animals. The woodcutter stopped cutting trees and instead became a healer, using his knowledge to help sick villagers. But when he tried to leave the forest to marry a human girl, the Mavka's heart turned cold, and she trapped him in a grove of trees where he joined the whispers of lost souls. The presence of Mavka changed how Ukrainian villagers lived their daily lives. People marked their paths with blessed herbs and never entered the forest alone at night. Parents taught children to listen for her singing and run the other way if they heard it. Yet they also left offerings of bread and milk at the forest edge, hoping she would protect their homes from wild animals and help their gardens grow. The Minyades lived in ancient Greece as three sisters who showed great disrespect to Dionysus, the god of wine and parties. These young women refused to join his sacred festivals, choosing instead to stay home and weave at their looms. Their devotion to work rather than worship angered the powerful god, who had given them many chances to change their ways. From far away, the sisters looked like normal young women dressed in fine clothes with long dark hair. Up close, their faces showed pride and stubbornness as they worked at their looms. Their fingers moved quickly across the threads, creating beautiful cloth that earned praise from everyone in their town. One day, as they worked and told stories, strange things began to happen in their weaving room. Ivy vines grew through the walls, their looms dripped with honey, and they heard drums beating. The sisters ignored these signs from Dionysus until snakes appeared among their threads. Still, they kept working, making the god so angry that he drove them mad. The sisters paid a terrible price for ignoring the god's warnings. In their madness, they tore apart one sister's young son, thinking he was a goat. Afterward, Dionysus turned them into bats, forcing them to hide from the sun forever. Their story taught other Greeks to respect the gods and take part in religious festivals, no matter how busy they were. Parents used this tale to teach their children about keeping promises to the gods. The fate of the Minyades showed that even hard-working people must make time for worship. Greeks who heard this story learned that pride could lead to punishment and that no one should think themselves above the gods. A nightmare stalked sleeping humans in the shadows of medieval Europe, sitting on their chests and stealing their breath while they slept. This dark spirit could slip through any crack or keyhole to reach its sleeping victims. People believed a nightmare caused the feeling of being unable to move or cry out during sleep, a terrifying power that made everyone fear going to bed at night. The nightmare took the shape of a small, twisted creature with long fingers and wild, tangled hair. It had the legs of a horse but walked on 2 feet like a human. Its eyes glowed red in the dark, and its skin looked like old leather stretched too tight over sharp bones. The nightmare weighed very little, but victims said it felt as heavy as a horse when it sat on their chest. One famous story tells of a blacksmith who caught a nightmare in his shop. The creature came through his window as a puff of smoke, but the blacksmith trapped it by plugging every hole in the room with blessed wooden pegs. When morning came, he found a small woman with horse hooves trying to hide in the shadows. He freed her only after she promised never to attack sleeping people in his village again. People created special charms and rituals to keep nightmares away from their beds. They hung horseshoes above their doors because nightmares feared iron and horses. Some slept with scissors under their pillow, believing the crossed metal would keep the creature away. Parents told their children to say special prayers before bed and sleep with their shoes pointing toward the door, as nightmares could not attack someone who might escape. The fear of nightmares changed how people built their homes. They covered every crack with iron nails and carved special marks around windows and doors. Builders placed horse skulls in the walls of new houses to ward off these creatures. These customs spread through villages and towns, turning simple homes into fortresses against the darkness that crept in during the night. The Nuno lived in the rivers and lakes of Japan, where it turned itself into a giant black cloud during storms. This water spirit gained great respect from fishermen and farmers because it controlled both helpful rain and dangerous floods. People believed the Nuno watched over their villages, ready to reward good behavior or punish those who wasted water. The Nuno looked like a cloth that floated in the air, much like a wet blanket hanging on a line. Its body stretched wider than 3 men standing side by side, and it changed from white to dark gray as its mood shifted. When angry, the Nuno grew long whiskers made of lightning that crackled and sparked in the sky. One famous tale tells of a poor farmer who always shared his water with others during dry times. The Nuno noticed his kindness and turned into a rain cloud over his fields. While other farms dried up in the heat, the farmer's crops grew tall and strong. The Nuno kept the rain falling on his land until harvest time, and the farmer had enough food to feed the whole village. The Nuno shaped how Japanese villagers thought about water use. Mothers told their children to keep rivers clean and never waste water, or the Nuno might bring storms to their homes. Fishermen left small gifts of rice at the water's edge to thank the Nuno for safe fishing trips. Even today, some older Japanese people say they feel the Nuno's presence when storm clouds gather over lakes and rivers. The nymphs lived in every corner of ancient Greece, from high mountain peaks to deep forest pools. These nature spirits could change the weather, help plants grow, and even grant special powers to humans they favored. Greeks both feared and loved the nymphs, knowing these beings could either bless their lands with plenty or curse them with drought. Nymphs looked almost exactly like beautiful young women, but small signs showed their true nature. Their hair might float as if underwater even in still air, or flowers could sprout where their feet touched the ground. Their skin glowed with a soft light, and their eyes changed color with their moods, like leaves turning from spring green to autumn gold. One of the most famous stories tells of the nymph Daphne and her escape from Apollo, the god of the sun. When Apollo fell in love with her and chased her through the forest, Daphne begged her father, a river god, for help. Just as Apollo was about to catch her, Daphne turned into a laurel tree. Her fingers became twigs, her hair changed to leaves, and her feet grew into roots. The Greeks shaped their lives around the presence of nymphs. Farmers left small gifts of honey and milk near springs to keep the water flowing. Hunters asked permission before entering forests where nymphs lived. Travelers often stopped to pray at trees marked as nymph homes, hoping for safe passage through wild places. The Onryo haunted the homes and villages of Japan, appearing most often at sunset or in dark places. This angry ghost could change from a beautiful woman into a terrifying spirit with long black hair and burning eyes. People feared Onryo because these ghosts sought revenge against those who had wronged them in life, and their curse could spread to harm entire families or towns. The ghost usually appeared first as a lovely young woman in a white burial kimono, a traditional Japanese robe worn after death. Her feet never touched the ground as she floated closer to her victim. When she attacked, her face turned pale as paper, her eyes glowed with blue fire, and her fingers stretched into long, bony claws. One famous Onryo, named Oiwa, haunted her husband after he poisoned her and married another woman. She appeared in mirrors, lamps, and even in the face of his new bride. Her ghostly face followed him everywhere until he went mad with fear and confessed his crime to the village. His guilt drove him to take his own life, but stories say Oiwa's spirit still searches for unfaithful husbands. The fear of Onryo changed how Japanese people treated others, especially women of noble birth. Families took great care to keep peace with their daughters and wives, hoping to prevent an angry ghost after death. People also placed special charms in their homes and prayed at temples to protect themselves from spirits seeking revenge. The Wabanaki people of Maine told stories of Pamola, a giant bird spirit who lived at the top of Mount Katahdin, the highest peak in their lands. This mighty creature controlled the cold winds and storms that swept down from the mountain. Travelers and hunters feared Pamola because he guarded his mountain home fiercely, sending dangerous weather to those who dared climb too high. Pamola had the head of a moose, with large antlers that scraped the clouds as he moved. His body was like that of an eagle, with powerful wings that stretched wider than 10 tall pine trees. His feet ended in huge claws that could grip the rocky cliffs of his mountain home, leaving deep marks in the stone. One story tells of a brave hunter who climbed Mount Katahdin despite warnings from his village. When he reached the summit, Pamola appeared in a whirlwind of snow and ice. The spirit bird carried the hunter to his nest, where he learned that Pamola protected the mountain to keep people safe from its dangers. The hunter returned to his people with new respect for the mountain spirit. The Wabanaki changed their ways of hunting and traveling based on their belief in Pamola. They would not climb Mount Katahdin during storms or winter, and they left offerings of food and tobacco at the base of the mountain before hunting nearby. Even today, some climbers leave small gifts at the mountain's base to show respect for this powerful spirit. The Paskunji haunted dark corners of homes across India, where it used its powers to make people sleepwalk. This bird-like spirit could enter dreams and control sleeping minds, leading victims on strange walks through their villages. People both feared and asked for help from the Paskunji, since it could either cause trouble or protect homes from evil spirits. The creature looked like a large crow, but with striking golden eyes and silver-tipped wings that glowed in moonlight. Its feet had long, curved claws that made no sound when it walked. The Paskunji stood as tall as a child, and could stretch its neck like a snake to peer through windows. A story tells of a Paskunji that saved a whole village from thieves. The spirit made every sleeping person walk to the village square, just as robbers planned to strike. When the thieves arrived, they found hundreds of villagers standing silently in the moonlight. The sight scared them so much they ran away and never returned. The Paskunji shaped how people built their homes and lived their daily lives. Families hung bells near windows to warn of its presence and placed bowls of milk outside to keep it happy. Parents told children to say special prayers before bed, hoping to either invite the spirit's protection or avoid its mischief. People believed a house visited by a Paskunji would never fall to ruin. Those who gained its favor found their dreams filled with warnings about danger or hints about good fortune. Even today, some villages in India leave offerings for this dream-walking spirit, respecting its power over the sleeping world. The Pellicet haunted the villages of Malaysia as a feared spirit that could enter human bodies and cause great pain. This tiny creature served witches called Bomos, who sent the Pellicet to attack their enemies. People believed only special healers could remove a Pellicet once it took hold of someone, making it one of the most dreaded spirits in Malaysian folklore. The Pellicet takes the shape of a cricket or grasshopper no bigger than a thumb, but glows with an eerie green light. Its eyes shine like small red flames in the dark, and sharp claws grow from its feet. Unlike normal insects, the Pellicet can stretch and shrink its body to slip through the smallest gaps. even entering homes through keyholes or tiny cracks. One famous tale tells of a young woman who refused to sell her land to a powerful bomo. The witch sent her Cat-sìth to torment the woman each night. The spirit crawled into the woman's body while she slept and caused her to feel burning pain and speak in strange voices. After many sleepless nights, the woman sought help from a Muslim healer who caught the Cat-sìth in a special bottle and broke its power. Villages lived in fear of the Cat-sìth, hanging special charms near windows and doors to keep the spirit away. Parents warned children to come inside before dark when the Cat-sìth hunted, and families paid healers to bless their homes. Even today, some Malaysian communities still protect themselves against the Cat-sìth, showing how deeply this creature shaped their culture. Pocong haunted the back roads and graveyards of Indonesia, floating above the ground in the dark hours before dawn. This ghost kept its burial shroud, a white cloth tied in knots above the head and below the feet, even after breaking free from the grave. People feared the Pocong most because it moved by hopping, making a soft thumping sound that grew louder as it came closer. The Pocong looked much like a person wrapped for burial, standing upright but with no feet touching the earth. Its face showed gray-green skin pulled tight across hollow cheeks, and its eyes glowed with a sickly green light. The white shroud that covered it from head to toe grew dirty and ragged with time, marked by the soil of its grave. A notable tale tells of a young man who mocked the Pocong, staying out late and daring it to show itself. The ghost appeared behind him as he walked home, following closer and closer until its cold breath touched his neck. When the man ran, the Pocong kept pace, hopping alongside him until he fainted from fear. Villagers found him the next morning. His hair turned white from fright. The Pocong changed how people behaved after dark. Families built high fences around their homes and hung special charms near windows and doors. No one walked alone at night, and people hurried home before sunset. Parents warned children to respect the dead and their burial customs, fearing that mockery might draw the Pocong's attention. The poltergeist haunted homes across Germany in the Middle Ages, moving objects and making loud noises without being seen. Unlike friendly house spirits, this ghost used its power to throw plates, slam doors, and create chaos in quiet family homes. People feared the poltergeist because it could strike any house without warning and stay for days or months at a time. No one could see the poltergeist, but everyone knew when it arrived. It started with small sounds like knocking on walls or footsteps in empty rooms. Then items began to float and spin in the air as if held by invisible hands. The ghost grew bolder over time, turning furniture upside down and breaking windows with stones that flew by themselves. One famous case took place in a baker's home in Munich during the year 1200. The Pontianak haunts the banana groves and dark roads of Southeast Asia, searching for her next victim in the night. This female ghost brings terror with her sweet perfume and the crying of a baby, hiding her true deadly nature. People in Malaysia and Indonesia fear her most when walking alone, as she hunts men who harmed women in life. She appears first as a beautiful woman in a flowing white dress, with long black hair that reaches past her waist. Her pale skin glows in moonlight, drawing victims closer before they see her true self. When ready to strike, she shows her real form, a monster with red eyes, sharp claws, and a hole in her back where a nail was driven to stop her from hunting. The most famous tale tells of a young man who met a lovely woman on a quiet road at night. He offered to walk her home, drawn by her beauty and the smell of flowers in the air. But when he reached to help her over a fallen tree, she turned to face him, showing her fierce red eyes and bloody fangs. The man ran all the way home, but her cruel laugh followed him through the darkness. Village people protected themselves from the Pontianak by hammering nails into holes in trees and walls, as this was said to trap her inside. Pregnant women stayed away from banana trees at night, fearing the ghost might take their unborn children. Many families planted thorny plants beneath their windows, hoping to catch her dress if she tried to enter their homes. Parents told these stories to teach their children about staying safe at night and treating others with respect. Young men learned to be kind to women, knowing the Pontianak punished those who caused harm. Even today, people in small villages look away when they smell flowers on a dark road, remembering the ghost who waits in the shadows. The Preta wanders through ancient India and other parts of Asia, cursed with endless hunger that nothing can satisfy. These spirits feel constant pain from their huge empty stomachs, which drives them to search for scraps of food and dirty water. People both pity and fear the Preta, as they show what happens to those who live selfish lives filled with greed. The Preta looks like a walking skeleton with paper-thin gray skin stretched over its bones. Its stomach swells up like a large ball, but its throat stays as thin as a needle, so almost no food can pass through. The Preta's mouth shoots fire when it tries to eat or drink, burning up any food before it can swallow. One story tells of a wealthy man who never shared his food with others during a time of hunger. After he died, he became a Preta and returned to his old home, watching his family enjoy large meals through the window. He tried to steal small bits of their food each night, but everything turned to coal in his mouth, forcing him to witness others enjoy what he could never have. Families in many parts of Asia leave out small amounts of food and water for the Preta, hoping to ease their suffering. People teach their children to share food with others and avoid being greedy, using the Preta as an example of what greed can do. Monks and priests perform special ceremonies to help these spirits find peace and move on to a better life. The sight of a Preta serves as a warning to the living, reminding them that actions in this life affect what happens after death. Communities hold special days to remember ancestors and feed hungry spirits, believing this helps prevent their loved ones from becoming Preta. These traditions of sharing food and showing kindness continue to bring people together, even today. The printer's devil haunted printing shops across Europe in the Middle Ages, a mischievous spirit that workers blamed for printing mistakes and mixed-up letters. This small demon showed itself most often at night, when tired workers rushed to finish their pages. Printers believed it had the power to reverse letters, smudge ink, and hide important tools just when they needed them most. The creature looked like a child-sized human, but with ink-black skin that dripped onto everything it touched. It had long, thin fingers perfect for picking up tiny metal letters, and eyes that glowed like hot lead. Its feet left small, sooty footprints that faded away by morning, and it gave off a smell like burning paper and metal. A relevant story tells of a printer's devil in London that changed the words in a Bible just before printing. The demon switched just 2 letters, making God's kindness read as God's killness. When people found this mistake, they forced the printer to burn every copy and start over, nearly ruining his business. The printer's devil shaped how printing shops worked for hundreds of years. Workers set out small bowls of fresh ink at night to keep the spirit happy, hoping it would leave their work alone. Some printers gave their young helpers the title Printer's Devil to show respect for the spirit, and this name stuck until modern times. Even today, some old printing shops keep this tradition and blame missing tools or odd mistakes on their shop's devil. The Revenant haunted the cold lands of medieval Europe, rising from its grave to seek revenge on those who wronged it in life. This walking corpse kept all the strength it had when living, but felt no pain and could not be stopped by normal weapons. People feared revenants because these undead beings remembered exactly who had hurt them and would hunt their targets without rest. The entities looked much like it did at death, though its skin turned a sickly gray and its eyes glowed with an unnatural light. Its wounds remained open and fresh, serving as a reminder of how it died. These undead creatures moved with strange, jerking steps, but could run as fast as a horse when chasing their prey. A notorious tale tells of a revenant who rose to punish a group of thieves who had killed him for his money. Night after night, the undead man visited each thief, dragging them from their beds and breaking their necks. The local villagers could only watch in horror as the revenant picked off the criminals one by one until justice was done. The fear of becoming a revenant shaped how medieval people treated the dead. They placed heavy stones on graves to keep corpses from rising, and buried criminals face down so they would dig deeper into the earth instead of up toward the surface. Some communities even cut off the heads of people they thought might return, believing this would stop them from becoming revenants. Shadow people lived in the corners of homes and dark places around the world. These spirits could move through walls and had the power to watch humans without being seen clearly. People both feared and respected them because shadow people could appear at any time, day or night, though they showed up most often when someone was alone or half asleep. These beings looked like flat, dark shapes in the rough form of humans, but without clear faces or features. Some stood as tall as doorways while others crouched low to the ground like children. People who saw them said they appeared darker than the darkness around them, like a piece of night that refused to fade even in daylight. The most famous stories about shadow people came from those who woke up feeling unable to move, with a dark figure standing beside their beds. These beings never spoke or touched anyone, but their presence alone could make a room feel cold and heavy with fear. Some people said the shadow would stand completely still for many minutes before sliding away through a wall or fading into nothing. Shadow people changed how many humans lived in their homes. People began leaving lights on at night and avoiding empty rooms, worried these beings watched them from dark corners. Parents taught children to sleep facing away from shadows and to never stare too long at dark shapes that seemed to move on their own. A Shinigami roamed between the world of the living and the dead in Japan. These death gods held the power to see how long humans would live and could choose when to end their lives. People both feared and respected Shinigami because they brought order to death itself, making sure souls moved properly from one world to the next. The Shinigami took many shapes, but most often looked like tall, dark figures in black robes. They carried special notebooks where they wrote the names of those marked for death. Some stories showed them with white bone masks or faces like demons, while others described them as beautiful but cold beings with eyes that glowed in the dark. The most known tale tells of a young Shinigami who fell in love with a human woman. He watched her grow from a child into a lovely person who helped others and lived with joy. When her time came to die, he could not write her name in his death notebook. For breaking this rule, the other Shinigami turned him into a cherry tree, forced to bloom each spring when she would visit to remember him. The Japanese people changed how they lived because they believed Shinigami watched over them. They tried to live good lives, knowing these beings judged their actions. Families left small gifts of rice and sake for the Shinigami, hoping to earn their favor. Many people wrote poems and stories about meeting these death gods, sharing lessons about facing the end of life with grace. The siren lived in the deep forests of ancient Russia, where its heavenly singing could charm any human who heard its voice. This mythical bird held the power to tell the future through its songs, making rulers and warriors seek it out despite the dangers. People both feared and respected the siren, because while its music brought joy and wisdom, those who listened too long would forget their lives and follow the bird until they died. The siren looked like a bird from its wings to its tail, but had the head and chest of a beautiful woman. Its feathers shone like moonlight on snow, and its human face glowed with an otherworldly light. The bird was about the size of an eagle, with long, flowing hair that sparkled with tiny stars and eyes that changed color like gems in sunlight. Legends suggest a young prince who heard the siren's song while hunting in the woods. The bird's music told him of a great war coming to his land, but also sang of how he could save his people. The prince wanted to stay and learn more, but remembered the warning tales and covered his ears. He rushed home to prepare his kingdom, saving countless lives. The siren shaped how Russian people lived their daily lives, as they created special charms and rules to deal with its power. Travelers wore small bells to drown out its song, while hunters turned back if they heard singing in the woods. Parents taught children to sing loudly on forest paths, and villages posted guards to listen for the bird's deadly music near their homes. The Sluagh flew through Scottish nights as a flock of restless spirits, stealing souls from people close to death. These dark creatures from Highland folklore had the power to enter homes through any opening, no matter how small, and could only be stopped by keeping western windows tightly shut. People believed the Sluagh chose the darkest, stormiest nights to hunt, when their shadowy forms blended with the clouds above. Like birds made of smoke and shadow, the Sluagh had thin, leathery wings and clawed hands that reached for their victims. Their faces looked almost human but twisted with hunger and hate, their eyes glowing like dying embers in the dark. The spirits moved together in groups of hundreds, making a sound like rushing wind mixed with whispered prayers. The most famous tale of the Sluagh tells of a dying chieftain whose clan kept watch through the night to protect his soul. As the spirits pressed against doors and windows, the guards began to tire. One guard fell asleep for just a moment, leaving a window unlocked. The Sluagh poured in through the crack and dragged the chieftain's soul into the night sky, where people say it still flies with the dark flock. Scottish families changed how they built their homes because of the slua, placing fewer windows on the western walls where the spirits flew in from. People also created special prayers and rituals to keep loved ones safe during storms. On dark nights, families would gather together, seal their windows, and tell stories until dawn to keep watch over anyone who was sick or weak. Tannins made their home in German forests, where they guarded hidden treasures with powerful magic. These forest spirits changed the size of their body at will, growing from the height of a mouse to taller than the oldest oak tree. People both feared and respected tannins because they punished greedy humans, but rewarded those who treated the forest with care. A tannin looked like a mix between a tree and a person, with bark-like and long fingers that branched like twigs. Its eyes glowed green like sunlight through leaves, and moss grew along its arms and back. When it walked, its feet left patches of mushrooms and flowers. Voice sounded like rustling leaves mixed with distant thunder. The most known tale of the tannin tells of a poor woodcutter who always planted 2 trees for each one he cut down. One cold winter day, a tannin appeared before him as a small, wounded bird. The woodcutter shared his last piece of bread with the bird and wrapped it in his only warm coat. The tannin revealed its true form and led the woodcutter to a cave filled with gold coins. The story of the kind woodcutter taught people to take care of the forest and share with others, even when they had little to give. Parents told their children to listen for the sound of rustling leaves that meant a tannin watched over them. Woodcutters began the practice of planting new trees to replace the ones they cut, a tradition that continues in parts of Germany today. Tantugu watched over the farms and fields in Japan's mountain villages. This forest spirit kept people honest by catching anyone who stole crops or damaged trees. Farmers both feared and thanked Tantugu because he protected their hard work and taught children to respect nature. He looked like a short old man with wild white hair and beard that reached his chest. Tantugu wore rough brown clothes made from tree bark and carried a heavy wooden staff. His eyes shone bright red at night, helping him spot wrongdoers in the dark. People said he could move without making a sound, like a leaf floating on the wind. The most famous story tells of a hungry man who tried to steal rice from his neighbor's field late one night. Just as he began cutting the rice plants, Tantugu appeared behind him with glowing red eyes. The spirit struck his staff on the ground 3 times, and the thief ran away so fast he left his sandals behind. The next morning, everyone found the sandals standing upright in the middle of the field as a warning. Parents used tales of Tantugu to teach their children about honest work and respect for others' property. Farmers left small gifts of rice and sake for the spirit during harvest time to show thanks for his protection. Even today, some Japanese villages hold festivals to honor Tantugu and remind people about the value of working together and treating nature with care. The Pteryxippus haunted the horse racetracks of ancient Greece, striking fear into both riders and their steeds. This invisible spirit held power over horses, making them panic and crash during important races. The Greeks built special shrines near dangerous turns of their racetracks to please this feared deity and protect their animals from its cruel tricks. The spirit took no physical form that human eyes could see, but horses sensed its presence clearly. Riders told tales of their horses stopping suddenly, as if hitting an invisible wall. Strong, well-trained horses would rear up, throw their riders, or bolt away from the track when they felt the Pteryxippus near. One famous story tells of the champion horse Pherenikos, who never lost a race until meeting the Pteryxippus at Olympia. As Pherenikos rounded the sharp turn near the spirit's shrine, the mighty horse began to shake with fear. Despite his rider's skill, Pherenikos charged into the crowd, ending his perfect racing record and proving the spirit's power over even the bravest horses. The threat of the Pteryxippus changed how Greeks built and ran their racetracks. They placed warning marks near spots where the spirit liked to appear, and riders learned special prayers for protection. Before each race, owners would leave small gifts at the spirit's shrine, hoping to keep their horses safe from its dangerous influence. The Tengu lived in the mountains of Japan, where it ruled the skies with its powerful magic and fighting skills. This bird-like spirit could change its shape at will and taught martial arts to worthy students. People both feared the Tengu for its quick temper and respected it for its wisdom, treating it as a guardian of Japan's sacred places. A Tengu looks like a warrior monk with bright red skin and a long, beak-like nose. Some wear the robes of mountain priests, while others dress in feathered cloaks that help them fly. They always carry special fans made of bird feathers, which they use to stir up great winds. Their eyes glow like golden coins in the dark, and many have wings as wide as pine trees. One Tengu story tells of how it trained the warrior Minamoto no Yoshitsune. The young Yoshitsune met the Tengu while living at a temple, where the spirit saw his pure heart and strong will. For many years, the Tengu taught him sword fighting in secret, helping him become one of Japan's greatest warriors. The Teng made him practice with heavy wooden swords and learn to jump from tall tree branches. The Teng shaped how Japanese people think about power and wisdom. Parents told their children to be respectful in the mountains, warning that the Teng would punish proud or rude behavior. Martial arts schools hung pictures of Teng in their training halls, hoping to gain some of their fighting spirit. Even today, many Japanese people leave small gifts at mountain shrines for these powerful spirits. The Tomte lived in farms across Sweden and Norway, watching over the animals and buildings at night. This tiny house spirit stood no taller than a small child, but it held great power over the success or failure of a farm. People both feared and respected the Tomte because it could either help their farm thrive or bring bad luck if treated poorly. The Tomte looked like an old man with a long white beard, wearing simple gray wool clothes and a bright red cap. Its eyes glowed in the dark like a cat's, and though it was small, it had the strength of 10 men. The Tomte moved so quietly that even mice could not hear its footsteps as it walked through the farm at night. A rather famous story tells of a farmer who found his horses perfectly groomed each morning, their manes braided and coats shining. He stayed up one night and saw the Tomte caring for the horses, feeding them extra oats from the barn. The farmer left a bowl of warm porridge with butter as thanks, and from that day on his farm became the most successful in the village. The Tomte shaped how farmers lived their daily lives. Families left out food for it every night, kept their barns tidy, and taught their children to be respectful of the farm spaces. They believed a happy Tomte meant healthy animals, good harvests, and protection from bad luck. Even today, many Swedish homes place small Tomte statues in their gardens to bring good fortune. The Turul soared through the skies of ancient Hungary as a mighty bird of power and wisdom. This sacred falcon carried a sword in its claws and brought messages from the gods to the people below. The Hungarian tribes believed the Turul chose where they should build their new home, making it one of their most important spiritual guides. These beings stood taller than 3 men when perched, with feathers that shone like polished metal in the sun. Its wings spread wider than the longest boat, and its eyes glowed with an inner fire that could pierce the darkness. Unlike normal birds of prey, the Turul had a crown of golden feathers that marked it as a messenger of the gods. The most famous tale of the Turul tells how it appeared to Amese, the mother of Hungary's first ruler. In her dream, the great bird landed beside her and told her that her son would lead their people to a new homeland. The Turul then placed a golden crown on her belly, showing that her child would start a line of mighty kings. The Hungarian people painted the Turul on their battle flags and carved its image into their doorways for protection. Hunters asked for its blessing before they set out, and new mothers placed Turul feathers above their babies' beds to keep them safe. The bird became such an important symbol that even today, many Hungarians see the Turul as a guardian of their nation. Throughout the villages and cities, people built stone carvings of the Turul, with its wings spread wide and its sword ready to defend the land. These statues helped everyone remember the great bird that had guided their ancestors to their home, and they taught children about the power of following divine signs. Far beneath the dark streets of ancient India, the Vatala haunted burial grounds and made its home in dead bodies. This clever spirit could jump from corpse to corpse, using each body like a puppet to trick the living. People both feared and respected the Vatala because it loved to challenge humans with riddles that tested their wisdom and courage. The Vatala looked different in each body it took over, but certain signs always showed its presence. The body moved backward instead of forward, spoke in a hollow voice, and cast no shadow on the ground. Its eyes glowed red in the darkness, and it could climb walls like a spider. The most prominent story tells of King Vikramaditya's battle of wits with a Vatala. The king had to carry a corpse with a Vatala inside it to a magic man, but the spirit told the king puzzling stories along the way. Each tale ended with a hard question, and if the king answered, the Vatala would fly back to the burial ground, forcing the king to start over. The game went on for 25 nights. The Vatala changed how people thought about death and wisdom. Parents told their children Vatala stories to teach them how to think carefully and speak truthfully. Travelers avoided burial grounds at night, and wise men studied the Vatala's riddles to learn about justice and fair choices. Even kings learned that sometimes the smartest choice was to stay silent, just as King Vikramaditya finally won by not answering the Vatala's last question. The Wanagi roamed the lands of the Great Plains, where many Native American tribes lived and hunted. These spirit beings could move between the world of the living and the world of the dead. The Lakota people both feared and honored the Wanagi, as they believed these spirits could either protect or harm the living. These spirits could take many shapes, from shadow figures to glowing lights that floated above the ground. Some looked like normal people but cast no shadow, while others appeared as small whirlwinds of dust. The Wanagi could also enter dreams, where they often took the form of loved ones who had passed away. The most notable story tells of a young hunter who met a Wanagi near sunset. The spirit appeared as his grandfather who had died the previous winter. The hunter shared his food with the spirit and listened to its warnings about a dangerous storm coming. Because he showed respect to the Wanagi, the hunter survived the fierce blizzard that followed and helped his village prepare for it. The Lakota people changed many parts of their daily lives because of the Wanagi. They built special spirit houses near their burial grounds to give the Wanagi places to rest. Families left out small amounts of food and water for wandering spirits. People also spoke carefully about the dead, knowing that Wanagi might be listening nearby. During important ceremonies, the Lakota made special offerings to welcome friendly Wanagi and keep harmful ones away. They burned sacred herbs like sage and sweetgrass, which they believed helped good spirits find their way to the ceremony. Children learned from an early age to respect these spirits and the thin line between the world of the living and the dead. The Wet'suge stalked the forests of western Canada, where it hunted humans with endless hunger and supernatural strength. This fearsome spirit began as a normal person who gained too much power from ancient animal spirits, turning them into a cursed being that craved human flesh. The Dane Zaa people feared the Wet'suge not just for its deadly nature, but because anyone in their tribe could become one by breaking sacred rules. The creature took the form of a being made of solid ice, towering over its victims with a frozen, human-like shape. Like winter itself come to life, the Wet'suge moved with shocking speed through the forests, leaving trails of frost in its wake. Its icy body could not be harmed by normal weapons, as arrows and spears would simply shatter against its frozen form. Some speak of a Wet'suge that tried to trick a group of hunters by calling out with a human voice, pretending to be lost in the woods. The hunters knew better than to split up, staying close to their fire through the night. When morning came, they found giant frozen footprints circling their camp, showing how the Wet'suge had stalked them in the darkness. The threat of becoming a Wet'suge shaped how the Dane Zaa lived their daily lives. They followed strict rules to avoid gaining too much power. They would not eat meat with fly eggs, have their picture taken with bright flashes, or listen to music played on stretched animal skins. Breaking these rules meant risking a fate worse than death, becoming a monster that would hunt their own people. The only way to destroy a Wet'suge was to trap it and melt its icy form in a large fire until nothing remained. This task proved so difficult that stories of successful Wet'suge hunters became legends, passed down through generations as proof that even the most terrible creatures could be defeated with wisdom and bravery. The Wendigo stalked the cold forests of Canada and the northern United States. This evil spirit could turn people into hungry monsters who wanted to eat human flesh. Native American tribes, especially the Algonquian peoples, feared the Wendigo most during harsh winters when food was scarce. The creature looked like a walking skeleton with gray, rotting skin stretched tight over its bones. Its eyes sank deep in their sockets, and its bloody lips pulled back to show sharp teeth. The Wendigo stood many times taller than a human, and it gave off a smell like decaying meat. Most striking of all, the monster grew larger with each person it ate, but always stayed terribly thin. A tale has been passed of a Wendigo that caught a young Native American boy. The monster kept the boy alive, checking if he was fat enough to eat by cutting his hand. When the boy went to a nearby village for food, he showed the people his cut hand and asked for help. The villagers found the Wendigo and cut off its legs, but the creature lived on, eating the marrow from its own bones until the villagers finally killed it. The Wendigo shaped how native peoples lived and treated each other. The story warned against greed and taught people to share food in hard times. If someone acted too selfish or ate more than their share, others feared they might turn into a Wendigo. This belief was so strong that some villages held special dances to remind people about the danger of becoming too greedy. Travelers in England's dark swamps often saw strange lights floating in the night air. These ghostly flames, called will-o'-the-wisps, led people away from safe paths and into dangerous bogs. Local folk believed these lights were spirits who enjoyed tricking humans into getting lost in the marshes. The will-o'-the-wisp looked like a small ball of blue-white fire that danced through the air. It moved like a candle flame in the wind, growing bigger and smaller as it bobbed up and down. When people came close, the light would fade until it was as dim as a distant star, but it grew bright again when they backed away. A story tells of a farmer named Will who was walking home late at night when he saw a beautiful light floating ahead of him. The light seemed to beckon him forward, promising to show him a shorter path through the marsh. Will followed the light for hours until he found himself stuck in thick mud, and the light vanished with a sound like laughing. People changed their whole lives to avoid meeting these trickster lights. They refused to travel at night near swamps, and always carried a cold iron key, which they believed would keep the will-o'-the-wisp away. Parents taught their children special verses to say if they ever saw the lights, and maps marked dangerous areas where the spirits often appeared. The wraith haunted the misty fields and empty roads of northern Europe, hunting for lone travelers in the dark. This ghostly creature could pass through solid walls and drain the life from sleeping victims with a single touch. People feared the wraith not just for its deadly powers, but because it could appear anywhere, at any time, giving no warning before it struck. The wraith looked like smoke given human shape, with eyes that glowed like dying embers in the night. Its body floated a few inches above the ground, trailing wisps of gray mist behind it as it moved. When the wraith found its prey, it would stretch and grow until it towered over them, its shadowy arms reaching out like long black claws. Many individuals have shared a famous wraith story which tells of a merchant who tried to trick death by staying awake for 7 nights in a row. On the 7th night, a wraith slipped through his bedroom wall like water through cloth. The merchant fought to keep his eyes open, but the wraith's presence made the air so cold and heavy that he could not help falling asleep. By morning, the merchant's family found only his empty clothes lying on the bed. Travelers changed their whole lives to avoid meeting wraiths. They refused to journey alone after sunset and hung iron charms above their doors, as wraiths could not pass near iron. People built their houses close together in tight groups, believing that wraiths preferred to attack those who lived far from others. Families would take turns keeping watch through the night, especially during the dark winter months when wraiths grew stronger. In Japanese homes, a special spirit called the Zashiki-warashi brings good luck and wealth to families. This childlike ghost lives in the oldest or nicest room of the house, known as the Zashiki. The spirit shows great care for the family that lives there, but only stays if people treat it with respect and kindness. The Zashiki-warashi looks like a 5 or 6-year-old child with bobbed hair and rosy cheeks. It wears traditional Japanese clothes from long ago, a red and white kimono with wooden sandals. Though the spirit can become invisible at will, many people say they have seen it playing or running through their homes at night. Undoubtedly, the most famous tale tells of a poor family who gained great wealth after a Zashiki-warashi moved into their home. The spirit made coins appear from nowhere, helped their crops grow better than their neighbors, and warned them about coming storms. But when the family became too proud and stopped caring for their house, the spirit left. Soon after, the family lost everything they had gained. People who live in old Japanese houses still leave out small toys and sweets for these spirits. They keep the Zashiki room clean and well kept, hoping the spirit will stay. Parents teach their children to be kind if they meet a Zashiki-warashi, saying that making friends with one will bring luck to the whole family for many years. Some families say they hear children's laughter or the soft sound of bouncing balls when no one else is home. They believe these are signs that their Zashiki-warashi feels happy and will continue to protect their home. The families treat these sounds as welcome music, knowing that as long as the spirit plays in their house, good fortune will stay with them.